Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions. We all have so many transitions in our lives, and I like to use the metaphor of triathlons, something I did just 3 days ago. Triathlons. Okay, first you're in the swim, and then you get in the transition area, and then you get on your bicycle, and you get in the transition area, and then you get on your feet and you run. And so that is a great metaphor. We have so many different things in our lives that we go from one thing to another, and we have a really fascinating person here today, James Alvarez. He was my yoga teacher. He is an amazing beekeeper here in Nashville in the Green Hills area. And we're going to have pictures of his amazing bees in his backyard and his pastel colored hives. It's amazing. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So you have beautiful, wonderful bees in your backyard. And I really would like to, before we talk about the bees, I think it's amazing you have transitioned from one thing to another to another. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you studied, from culinary things to physical things, and tell us a little background on you.
Well, I grew up in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
My family is from Spain and from the United States, particularly New York. And I lived there for 27 years, did my first college degree there, which is in sports, in Puerto Rico, in sports physiology. And then I moved to the States, to Miami, to further my culinary career, because I'd already cooked in a lot of places as a job. So I did a culinary degree there. And then I ended up moving here because my parents had moved here in the 90s. So I ended up coming here to be closer to my family and was pursuing the yoga, which is something I've done since I was a little kid. And kind of left the culinary behind. Just was too much fuss and too little pay. And I really wanted to do what I was passionate about, which was, you know, the bees, the yoga, and see if I could make a go at it. And I've been doing that since.
Wow. And you are an amazing yoga teacher, because I have, that's where I first met James and learned a whole lot. I need to get back into it. And now the bees. Tell us about, you have such passion for the bees. Tell us a little bit about how did you get into bees, of all things, honeybees?
Well, first I like honey a lot. Always liked honey, and always wondered what it was like to do beekeeping. When I lived in Puerto Rico, I was able to have little experience seeing beekeepers because it was a very rural thing. But when I got to the States, it was a little more, you know, there was a little more exposure to the bees, and I was able to see, when I lived in Florida, I was able to see some what they call apiaries, which is a bee farm. They have a lot of orange blossom honey, and I was able to kind of explore that, and I was like, I really want to do that. And then I started learning more about bees and about how bees were dying and all the things that were going on with them, and I just wanted to kind of get into it and see if I could do it without the bees dying and maybe get some good honey. And I've been doing it now for 8 years.
8 years, wow. I think maybe you can educate the world out there on first of all, just the basics. You have queens, and you actually name your queens, and the whole process of starting a hive, and you don't only have one hive, you have several hives, I guess.
Yeah, between 7, I've had between 7 and 15 hives in my property.
This is in your backyard?
This is in the backyard, yeah.
Wow, right in the suburbs?
Right in the suburbs. Wow. Well, actually the city suburbs, because we're literally 5 miles from downtown Nashville.
Wow.
So it's right there, you know, in Green Hills. I don't know, what do you want to know, how I started doing it?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, basically, you can either buy a package of bees, which have a queen and about 3,000 bees, a small colony.
A package of bees?
That's what they call it, an actual package. It comes in a box with sugar water to feed them, and then the queen comes in a cage. So she's protected and fed. Or you can catch a swarm. I brought a picture of a swarm so you can see what a swarm looks like.
Yeah.
It's usually a cluster of bees like this. And they fly together, and the queen's in the middle there somewhere being protected. So you can actually catch a swarm, and the first couple of years I bought packages, But then I just stopped buying packages and just caught swarms because they come to our yard. So as soon as a swarm lands, then I find a way to catch them, put them in a box, and keep them. And it's pretty cool. You don't really have to buy bees.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are attracted to your backyard because of the flowers in your backyard?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, we have a lot of different species of flowers kind of to train the bees. It's not enough for the bees to actually feed and sustain their colony, but it's enough for them to get, entice them to go there. And also, they see all the other hives. So that kind of tells them, hey, this is a great spot to go to. You know, there's a bunch of happy bees here, and the energy there is really, it's really cool. You know, that we do the bees for the bees, not necessarily for the honey or the money. But since we treat the bees good, we get some honey and we make some money. So it kind of works out that way. Most beekeeping is the other way around. It's just as a commercial-based thing. So the bees get exploited, and hence, well, the bees die. So,
do you feel that there really is an energy to growing bees, to taking care of bees, more than like the commercial things?
totally. I mean, at a commercial level, there's no energy. There's just it's a business. So the bees are being exploited, kind of like commercial agro farming. You know, where you have 1,000 cattle as opposed to 30, 40 cattle that you let graze and be omnivores. So I don't feed my bees sugar water like a lot of people feed them, or exploit them, or take more honey than I should. We kind of let them do their thing. We let them swarm if they have to swarm. I try to avoid it as much as I can, but if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. That's what they do. But we keep everything really natural, and you know, our energy is really good there. We're not ever trying to kill the bees or exploit them, and they pretty much understand that and act accordingly.
Wow. So tell me about the queen itself. And you have several queens, am I right on that?
Every hive has one queen. There
One
could be sometimes two queens when they're in transition, not to make a pun on your show, but in between the swarm, they'll create another queen, and sometimes the other bees haven't left before the other queen emerges or has emerged. So there may be two queens, but normally there's one queen per colony, and her pheromone runs basically the way the hive will know who's their queen. So that's how they know what hive to go into when they fly out and fly back.
Just because of the queen's pheromones?
The queen's pheromone is that strong that they'll know exactly where to go to. So there could be 20 hives there, and they're going to fly right to their hive.
Wow.
Doesn't mean that one bee every once in a while will make it into the wrong hive and either be killed or be accepted. That can happen. But most of the bees, you know, the 99% are going to go back to their hive because of that pheromone.
And then you have named your queens, am I correct? That's
Yeah, we give them names for every hive. You know, we got Jenny, we have Melissa, we got Lori, we had Piata before, which is my wife's grandmother's name, and when she was dying, we joined her with Jenny, and now we have Penny. So we just kind of play with that, but it's kind of an easier way to know your hives, as opposed to one of my beekeeper friends, you know, uses B1 or B2 or B3 or, you know, kind of stuff like that. We like to give it a name, and I think it gives it also kind of a little bit more of oomph to the hive, and we know what queen is there, so I think it's pretty cool.
That is very cool. You have some pictures too of a hive itself and how you get the honey in the comb.
Yeah, so this is kind of it's an older picture. It looks like it's from the 80s. The guy's got a pack of smokes, and he's kind of got one of those polo shirts. But it's similar to that. You would go in and look. The smoker is something that gets used on the bees to calm the bees. It's basically an ancient method. They smell smoke, and their instinct is to go ahead and start eating honey and gathering to get ready just in case, because most bees live in forests, in trees. That's the main thing. That's why we mimic with a hive, basically the tree. So that calms them down by eating, and then fills their bellies and their honey sac, and then they're not able to sting you or be, you know, feel like they want to come fly at you and sting you. So that's why the smoke is there. Usually hives are elevated from the ground. I think this was just for a purpose of demonstration. But normally they're elevated from the ground for ants and other bugs that want to get into the hive. But this would be a typical way of inspecting a hive. You go through the frames and you see what's actually going on in there to make sure that they're doing what they do.
So how often do you actually go and you would have to suit up?
Well, he's got a
right?
veil. I mean, sometimes I'll do the veil, sometimes I'll do the suit, sometimes I won't do anything. It just depends on
Huh.
how the bees are feeling that day. So there's times of the year where there's a lot of nectar during the height of spring and summer,
Mm-hmm.
and the bees aren't really worried about you. But sometimes after summer, like this time that's coming now, right at the end of July and August, the nectar starts to dwindle before fall. So we're finishing spring and summer,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a decay for a while before the fall plants start coming up, and they suffer from that because there's food shortage. So the bees will get very aggressive at that time,
Huh.
and you have to use a suit.
Okay. Yeah.
Or not, and then run.
You're right. Right.
And I do a lot of running. So.
Like, how do you know to the bees? Is it a good day today, bees? Or are you going to sting me? Or should we use a little smoke today?
Well, usually no. You'll walk out there, and you may just walk out there, and bam, they just sting you right away before you even getting anywhere close.
That's no fair.
It's not, but I mean, we're living
You're their friend.
I think I'm their friend sometimes. And sometimes I don't go. They have a 3 to 6 day memory. So sometimes I'm usually there pretty often, and sometimes I'm not. So we'll go on vacation, or I'll be out and I haven't gone to the bees,
Mm-hmm.
and so they forget who I am and forget my smell. So I may go out there and they may go ahead and just sting me.
Ow! Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always a surprise, but I've gotten used to it to
Wow.
a certain extent.
And I was hearing that there's something about if a bee stings humans, it dies, but if it stings other like dogs or something, it doesn't die.
Well, it will die with a lot of different animals, mammals, because of the dermis. So if it gets bears, raccoons, skunks, they're pretty typical creatures that like to attack hives or colonies that are in trees.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll get stung, but if they get stung in the eyes or in the lips, anywhere where there's like a dermis, the skin,
Mm-hmm.
the stinger will stay and the bee will die. But any other insect or creature that's got kind of a hard shell, they won't die. So like if a bumblebee goes into a hive, like today I was in the hives and they had a small bumblebee in there. They were dragging out of the hive because it got in there trying to find food, and they will sting it and sting it and sting it until they'll sting it and rip it apart basically.
Oh.
So they can sting multiple times, just like the queen can also sting multiple times.
Huh. Wow.
It's just with the humans and the dermis of mammals that they'll die,
thought
and they don't know it.
They don't know what.
They don't know that they're going to die when they actually sting a human or a bear. That's what I used to think before. It's just they can do it with other insects and other small creatures, but they go for it because they don't think they're going to die. So I used to think that they were just going to go and die, or if they were in a bad mood, they were just going to go ahead and just finish it off.
To do a suicidal
Right.
sting.
So it's not really like that.
Huh. I never knew that. Wow.
I didn't either for a while, and then I started researching more, and you got to kind of like anything with like yoga and different things like that, you got to kind of there's certain books and certain standards, but when you want to find out more, you got to kind of read more and find other viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found that out, it made a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. I saw a movie once about the mass commercialization of bees, where the bees are trucked in literally to.
Mm-hmm.
I think they call it monoculture, like all thousands.
Well, they're pollinating. They're
Right.
pollinator bees, what they call it.
And it's just one thing, like almond trees for acres and acres and acres,
Yep.
just one thing. And then you kind of feel that is taking advantage of the bees, or what is your thought?
Well, there's a lot of different, the bee colonies, or the bee populations, colonies in the U.S. per se, die pretty much at this point. They're dying between a 40 and 50% ratio. So people are losing between 40 to 50% of the bees, or all around in the U.S., 40 to 50% of the bees this year.
It's been in the news a lot.
Yeah, and they talk about pesticides, and
Right.
then they talk about we don't know pesticides, and we're not sure. But pesticides have been around for a long time, and it's been proven that bees will go to a plant that has pesticides on it,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll know that it's not natural, and they'll go to another. They'll go to another flower. But when they have no choice and everything around them has pesticides, that could affect the bees. But bees can travel between 3 to 7 miles to get forage. So when you're talking about the monocultures, they're going to almond fields, blueberry patches, even if you took them to a sage field that was, 50 acres of sage and just put them right in the middle, and they can't go any farther than that, then, it's like you eating rice only. You're going to be malnutritioned. And then on top of it, when they put them in these places, they're pollinating not just one thing, but they're also getting fed sugar water. And what sugar water is basically like a stimulant to them. It's like giving us cocaine or caffeine or methamphetamine. And what it does is it puts them to just go out and forage as opposed to come back and work on the brood, which is where they live, where they lay eggs, where they breed,
Okay.
where they store honey, pollen, propolis, the sap. So when they don't get to do that, I think genetically, I think an equivalent to that would be like mad cow disease. That was due to they were giving cows beef. The food they had in them had cow. So then they started getting this disease. So I mean, I'm not a scientist per se in that field, but I can correlate it to that. If you're only eating one thing, you're not getting the nutrition you need or the diversity of nectar or pollen or propolis, and you can't do your job in the hive, then of course the hive's going to die.
Wow. That theory is not getting out there, though.
There's some people that talk about it, some organic beekeeping people that talk about it. There's a very well-known writer from Berkeley that's called Michael Pollan, and he talks about that. He writes a lot of different books on different things from cooking and agriculture and even psychedelics, and he's very involved in finding out. And I've talked to him before because he came to Vanderbilt to do a talk, and I talked to him about it, and he agreed that, the monocultures is probably what's killing the bees.
Wow.
And it makes sense, too.
And then your personal bees that you have not seen them die off like that.
They've never died. I mean, the first year that I kept bees, I killed a couple bees because I didn't know what I was doing. So I did a couple rookie mistakes, moving a hive without quarantining a hive. Usually a hive knows where it's at, its position, plus the pheromone is strong in that particular position. So if you move them that same day and you don't quarantine them, especially during the day when they're out foraging, the bees will come back and they don't know where they're going, even if the hive is 20 feet away.
Oh, wow.
Because they got that, it's like if you walk home down a trail and you go there and you're like, wait a minute, even if your house is over here, they have that. The pheromone is so strong. So I did things like that, but after the first year, I've never had bees die other than when we've had a freak weather that we normally have here in Tennessee, where we'll have an early spring, and then we have 18-degree weather for 10 days. I had a hive die one time like that, but never have they died at all. Actually, they swarm like crazy.
Wow.
And right now, I was inspecting all the hives. I have too many bees right now. There's so many bees, and some are going to swarm.
So they swarm because, A, the population is too big, we got to go.
Right. So, in the case of us humans, we get older, they kick us out, we go to college. Well, when they get too big, the original queen, they go ahead and they make a queen cell. She lays an egg in there, they cap it, just put wax on it. As soon as they do that, one of the bees, the scout bees, there's a particular hertz that it emits, a certain pitch, and everybody knows that means time to go. And within less than 30 seconds, they're out of the hive and up in the air.
Whoa.
Up to 30 to 40,000 bees could be up in the air. And I've seen them do it plenty of times. I've seen them swarm in front of me. And you couldn't even run fast enough to catch them. Wow. 30 seconds, and they're all up in the air. And then they just fly away.
But then they have to land someplace.
So before that, the scouts find places where it looks like they could go. So days before they're swarming, they already know they're going to swarm. It could be even weeks before, even months. And they'll swarm when they're ready to swarm. That's when they go. But they usually have a place to go.
Okay.
Or they think they have a place to go.
So you have found swarms and picked them up?
Well, they come to our house. They just land in our house. In the last 5 years, I've probably had 50 swarms come over our house.
Good heavens.
Because a lot of people keep bees, as a hobby. And most people don't know what they're doing. They don't even inspect their hives properly. They may look on the top of the hive and think everything's okay, but their bees are swarming. You have to control the swarm. As they will swarm, in spring, if you don't control a hive and give it space, or even try to manipulate it so they have more space, because bees move up in a hive. So sometimes they'll move up in the boxes, which are called supers. And you sometimes have to flip them because they go through the first one, it gets empty, and then they move up, and then they don't have any more room. So you got to give them room. That's a good way of stopping a swarm, is kind of moving the bottom box to the top. So if you're not on top of it, that happens. So we get swarms, so many sometimes, that we're just like, we're not even looking at that swarm. We're not going to deal with it.
Wow.
But sometimes one looks really good, and I'm like, that one looks good. And we caught a really good one this year that's given us a lot of honey.
I see. Wow. And then the honey part, and we do have some examples here of some amazing honey. I have both of these here. Tell us about the end product, the honey, and then I know that at the 12 South Farmers Market, you are selling it on what day? The Tuesdays.
Tuesdays from 3:30 to 6:30. Yeah, because we're just 2 miles from that park, and the bees actually go to that park, and they go to Radnor Lake. I mean, our honey is, most honey, when I got into this, I thought was mostly natural. I thought, you raise the bees, you take the honey, you get the whatever particles out, and then goes right into the jar. But I found out that it isn't commercial beekeeping. The honey is, well, the bees aren't treated very well. The honey's taken when the beekeepers are ready for it, meaning they see that most of the honey's kind of there, and they'll just take it because they have a quota. And then the honey is filtered and it's heated. So once you do that, once you take it before it's ready, meaning before the combs are fully capped, so the honey can cure and then become the antihistamine for allergies, antiviral, antimicrobial, all those good things, and have the medicinal effect. That they go ahead on top of that they take it. They also filter it, so then you're eliminating all the living food, and then they heat it, and then whatever living food is left there is being killed. So basically, it turns into syrup.
Wow.
So when I started doing this, I didn't want to have syrup. I wanted to have real honey. So the way that we do it, there's not almost any dead bees around. Any bees that we actually kill, they drag out. There's not a mess of, bee parts. Plus, we don't have almost any pests. We do organic practices, and we've been, blessed that they work with our bees. So mites is a big issue, and people, most beekeepers filter the honey because there'll be mites in there. But if you look at this honey, I mean, you can see clearly it's pretty clear, and we haven't filtered it. It just went through a one-part sieve to just get the large particles of wax. So, I mean, it takes a little bit of work, but it's not so much work that, you couldn't get honey like this. But at a commercial level, I see how it could be difficult with hundreds of hives.
Right. And then you also not only have the hives, but you have a like corn. And tell us about your urban garden that's there too.
Well, we have a small garden, but it's still, the whole property is a half acre, and we have about a quarter acre in the back, and there we grow about, at least sometimes during the year, about 50% of the food that we eat.
Wow.
So we grow a lot of greens, and like you said, this year we grew corn and beans and squashes, and of course tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, and then of course the cucumbers went crazy this year. We've canned over 100 jars of cucumbers or pickles, and I think it's good to have like a little training for the bees there. The bees in the morning will go out, and some of them will feed off what's in the yard. It's definitely not enough to even maintain one hive. You'd need, about 500 acres to maintain a good small apiary, and have them in the center of that. But it's a good training tool, and we do take care of a lot of other pollinators like butterflies and bumblebees. And you see the color of the honey too. This tends to be, when you see a lighter color, tends to be a spring blend, because when spring comes up, there's only a couple things the bees can feed off, so the honey is very pure and clear and kind of sweet and doesn't have a lot of depth to it. Then once late spring and summer comes up, you start seeing a darker color, because their main source dwindles down, and then they have, instead of 5 or 10 sources, they may have 20, 30, 40, 50 sources. So then the honey gets darker because of all the different nectars that they combine.
Would you encourage people to start their own hive in their neighborhood, or?
Sure, it'd be great, but I would do it upon them getting the knowledge to try to keep the bees happy. And yes, if they swarm, that's okay, but try to not kill the bees. Most people kill their bees, or their bees die off, and usually it's because they take more honey than they need to.
Ah,
So
because they during the wintertime, what are the bees doing?
Well, they slow down. So in summer now they're going at 100 miles an hour. During winter they're going about 1 to 5 miles an hour. So the
Oh,
queen is still laying, but instead of 1,000 to 3,000 eggs a day, she may be laying 30 eggs a day.
Huh.
And they need the honey not only for food, but it's how they insulate their cluster where they get in. So they'll move everything to the middle of the hive, and they'll surround it with honey. And that honey will keep them warm. Their warmth will radiate to the honey, and the honey will keep them warm. So it's a duo, thing. It's keeps the heat, but then gives them food.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the big mistakes people make.
During the wintertime, you're not tending them because they're just hanging out, right?
No, I make sure that they're good for the winter. Usually about late spring, I make sure that they have plenty of honey, and then I'll know if they're okay by the weight of the hive.
Huh, meaning you feel how heavy it is and you know they're alive? Is
No, I'll go in there and I'll check with them. I'll see that they're doing good, that they have a queen, that their colony's doing good, but that they have enough honey stores, because you'll notice that they'll move the honey down. So sometimes I'll have a box on top that I'll leave full of honey, and I'll come back a week later and all that honey's been moved down, up to 30 pounds of honey.
Wow.
So they'll move that in a couple days or a day.
And yearly, how much honey did you say that you produce?
I produced up to almost 900 pounds, a little over 900 pounds, so close to 1,000 pounds one year. The average is between 300 and 600 to 700 pounds from a small apiary.
That is amazing.
Less than 10 hives.
Wow. And then it's medicinal.
Yeah, it's cured honey. Yeah, it helps you with anything. You can use it internally. You can use it topically.
For like a wound or something?
For a wound, a zit, a cut, a scrape. Even when you go into the garden, you're messing with tomatoes and you get all itchy, you can put that in a little bit of water and mix it up and just put it on, and it helps you with that too.
Wow, interesting. So it not only tastes good, but you can use it on your body, and it's available too in the summertime. And other than, do you have a website that we can?
We have an Instagram, and we do have a website. It's Om Honey 108.
Okay, Om Honey 108.
OMHONEY 108. Yep, like Om, because we're yogis, and it's organic made. So it's a little play on words. So either of those, you can find it on Instagram or you can find it online.
Okay, very good. Wow. Well, James, how fascinating. We learned so much about bees and about you. And one of these days we'll have you again on the show doing some yoga, which is amazing too. And I just think it's great, very inspirational. I want to go out and get some bees and put them in the yard and learn more about what to do with them.
Yeah, let me know. Thanks for having me. I'd love to come back.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Thank you.